Well, Don Cherry's predicting gold, and gold is just what Own the Podium was supposed to deliver right across the board for Canadian athletes. But tonight there are questions and controversy about the future funding for Canadian athletes. Wendy Mesley is in Toronto with more on this. Wendy.
Peter, there has been controversy about whether we should be so boastful and un-Canadian, controversy about whether the program has paid off, and now about how much the federal government should keep paying for it. So tonight we're asking, is Own the Podium doomed? Right from the get-go, Own the Podium had big goals, win more medals than any other country. And it had the financial backing to get the job done. This year, more than $22 million just for winter sports. Half from the federal government, the rest from the private sector and other levels of government. But Canada hasn't so much owned the podium as rented it to the Americans. And now, as the games wind down, the funding from corporations and the provinces is drying up. So Own the Podium is asking the federal government to make up for it, and more. They want not just the $11 million already promised, but an extra $22 million in funding. But with the feds running a massive deficit, the sports minister, Gary Lunn, is suggesting they should look elsewhere for any new dollars.
Continue on with that funding?
So, not likely, but out of the question? Well, we tracked down Gary Lunn in Vancouver today, and here's what he had to say.
The federal government is committed to its funding, absolutely, and we're so proud of our athletes. I can promise you this, that the athletes can count on our continued support.
If you listen closely, what Lunn said was its funding, meaning federal funding, which is $11 million. So it doesn't sound like more is on the way to make up that gap. So if the feds won't step in, what do? Well, there are other models. Many European countries get money from their national lotteries. In China, they just break open the central government's bank. Each of their golds in Beijing cost an estimated $100 million each. But the most interesting example of all is the U.S., who, of course, are once again leading the medal count. How much does their government spend? Nada. So where does the money come from? Well, get this. Because they deliver the richest sponsors and the biggest broadcast deals, they've cut a very sweet deal with the IOC and held on to it since back in 1996. This is how it works. So here's the deal. The USOC gets 12.75% of the U.S. broadcast revenue. NBC paid the IOC $2 billion for 2010 and 2012. The U.S. athletes' cut of that is $255 million. Canadian athletes sure don't get that. The USOC also gets 20% of the IOC's top-tier sponsorship money, another few hundred million. The other 204 countries get 20% too, but they have to share it. So we wanted to find out why Canada can't have that. We made lots of phone calls to the IOC, but officials there weren't eager to talk about the deal, except to say that it would be renegotiated in 2020. The suggestion being that the deal won't be repeated now that there are so many other big, rich players in the Olympics. For more on all of this, I spoke to an expert in sports marketing. What is the future? Who do you think should pay? Who should buy our gold?
I think it should be the government funding these types of programs, and I think corporate Canada has to step up as well and take a more significant role in the development of our athletes.
There's been lots of moaning and whining about we aren't owning the podium. You're saying we shouldn't feel so bad?
No, we shouldn't.
Really? So you think in the long run it'll pay off?
I really do. I really do. We've seen the results already. You know, you can talk about, people will say fourth and fifth isn't good enough. Well, fourth and fifth at this stage of Own the Podium is excellent. Those fourths and fifths could very easily be on the podium next Olympics.
If we hadn't spent the money for On the Podium, would we be worse than fifth?
We would be 11th, 12th, and 13th.
So make sure you check out our website. We always want to hear from you at cbc.ca/thenational.